Servus, Matthias Eichler here in this. Yes, this is Singletrack. This week I'm joined by Nick Coleman from the Miles, Mountain and Brews podcast based in beautiful Eastern Washington. If you love outdoor banter among friends, laughter and encouragement, you gotta check out this podcast and put it in your rotation. Nick loves climbing mountains. He's just returned from a winter trip up Mount Hood. He runs ultras and he chooses the insane ruck edition whenever possible. And Nick's here to share his incredible journey that he doesn't talk about much publicly. This episode is a special one. Thank you, Nick, for your openness and for sharing your story. I'll let Nick take this one away now. Well, all right, Nick, you're on Singletrack now. Let's do this. You come from Eastern Washington and you have a story to tell. You know what? I'm just going to leave the floor to you and I'm going to be excited about what I hear. I do know that you co-host a podcast, which I've been listening to for a while, and it's a very, very fun show, and I will be talking about the podcast that you're listening to. And then this weekend, you've just been up on one of our snowy volcanoes, Mount Hood, if I got that correctly. Did I?
Correct.
I mean, did it
Yes.
right? Yes. So you just came from a gigantic adventure, which I'm super excited to hear as well. So, Nick, welcome to the show. Where are you calling in from?
Calling in from Tri-Cities, Washington, Richland, Washington, that is.
Perfect. So this is another thing that we need to talk about because you also attempted to run Badger.
I did, and as your guest prior, he did not finish. I did not finish, but I had a ruck, and I did the 50-miler ruck, and I did, I think, 36 miles, and could not go any longer because my quads seized on me. So I think I told you a little bit about it on social media, and yeah, it's taken me a little bit to get over that. And with my adventure this past weekend, this year it started off a little challenging.
Oh, okay. I hear you. So very briefly, I know what the a ruck version of a race is, but give us the exact details. Like you're wearing a backpack, but how heavy does it have to be?
So Jason Rutherford, the race director, he just wants something from 20 to 30 pounds.
Okay.
Now, considering weight-wise, like let's say if you're 175 or 165 pounds and below, it's 25 max.
Okay.
25 pounds max. If you are, let's say, anything above that, it's 30 to 35 pounds. It just... with body mass index, weight, everything else. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, okay, that all makes sense. So the problem that you now have is that if you sign up for the Ruck Edition and it gets tough, you can't halfway through throw the backpack away and say, well, you know what, I still can finish running this thing. Let me just drop the backpack at an aid station and get a regular 50-mile finish.
Correct. I wish that was the case, but no. You hear some horror stories on people dropping weight because a lot of it's like rice.
Oh.
And so, I mean, it's expendable. So a lot of people just drop it. And, that's unfortunate to the sport. But ruck racing itself, it makes everyone equal, no matter what size and who you are. I mean... It's different, and that's why I do it. That's why I started doing it, because it makes everyone, when you're racing a 112-year-old pounder to a 150-pounder, they have that weight, but so do you. It makes everyone equal. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's.
Do you know the history? Does it come from the military? Where's the ruck racing coming from? Do you have any idea?
It might have been just like the mud racing, started probably because of the military as well. But it's just another avenue to just, get the adrenaline going and the excitement and everything else that running brings to everyone.
Totally. So do you like find races? Well, you're not finding races to exclusively ruck race because you signed up for Beast of Big Creek.
Yes.
Which I would welcome if you carry a backpack, but I'm not requiring it for sure. um, but so you're not exclusively running ruck.
Correct. No. I am everything and anything. For example, after the Badger Mountain Challenge, I was all like, you know what? Let me sign up for a 32-hour.
Okay, I
so,
like it. I
so,
like
so
it.
yeah, I'm going to be doing that later on in the year, and probably will be my last race of the year, just so I can enjoy the mountains more and enjoy, some things with family and friends, especially the co-hosts on my podcast. So,
Yeah, you
yeah,
don't want to stack your year too full with races, right? You otherwise don't get to enjoy.
correct.
So, well, perhaps we talk briefly about Badger. What made you DNF? What was it that threw you off?
I went into one of the aid stations. I think I had, 15 miles, 13, 15 miles left. And I peg legged to the last aid station. I couldn't go any longer. My quads. It was to the point that I went from. You've done Badger Mountain?
I've not been over there. It's never fit into my early season plan, but I mean, I sort of know the course, but not detailed.
You know McBee.
Yeah.
Okay, so McBee, and then the turnaround is on the top of the near the towers there. And that turnaround, when I hit the turnaround, because I was feeling good. I was telling my wife I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish before dark. I was feeling good. Went up McBee. McBee was a little damper. I went to the halfway mark, started going down, and I've been taking electrolytes and drinking water and taking everything in that I could, and I started going downhill from the midway point, and I felt this joint or this jolt between my in my groin area to it felt like a growing pool, just a single jolt from the inside of my leg to
Mm-hmm.
my testicles. I don't want to
Oh, yeah,
tell
yeah.
so many people, but
Yeah.
um, I mean, here I am. But I was like, wow, I need to drink some more water, so I'll just walk it off. I was going down the grade of McBee. It was getting worse. Went to the aid station to McBee. They helped me out. Gretchen was there. She was, trying to pull for me. She's like, 5 more miles until the next aid station. I was like, I don't know. Something's just not right. And so as I left the aid station after like a 30-minute break, I tried to run and I couldn't do so much of that because it was just so painful. So that 5 miles between McBee aid station to the Orchard aid station, it took an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's unheard of for me. And as I was going down, maybe the last 200 feet, my legs seized up. It was just a jolting, like shooting pain in both sides of my groin, my quads. I couldn't bend my leg. It was uncomfortable, and knowing what's ahead of me, I had to throw in the towel just because the Jeep trails, the infamous Jeep trails. I don't know if you heard anything about those, but let's say I did have another 5 miles. That would have been the most excruciating 5 miles of my life because those Jeep trails going down and up, there's no rhythm. It's like sand dune type. feel to it. I just didn't want to get caught up in that. So I actually had to tell them, like, hey, I DNF. They didn't want me to DNF. I didn't want to DNF, but everything was going so smoothly until I hit the turnaround point, and
I hear
yeah,
you. I mean, there's a level of pain that you sort of expect when you do these long distances, and you're
oh
sort of
yeah,
willing to kind of not just suffer through, but also logistically sort of
yeah,
work with, right? But there's another level where you sort of, you know what, this goes beyond what makes sense for me at the moment, and
yes.
I just need to be done. Was that your longest distance to date?
No, no,
Okay.
no. I do 50 milers. I tend to I enjoy 50 Ks and 20 milers. That's the max. I really I really enjoy 50 Ks though.
I like it. What makes that distance for you that you enjoy?
The camaraderie,
Okay.
the
Do you feel
camaraderie.
like because runners aren't spaced out as much? Is that what brings the camaraderie together?
I don't know. It's just the friendliness. The Everybody's out there to have fun. No one's, if you're maybe one of the top elites that are in those races, maybe the first five people, that cross the finish line, you probably don't have time or day, but majority of those people are just there to have fun, and that's where I'm at. I used to be competitive. I mean, I am still competitive in my own little way, but just being out there and shooting the breeze with fellow runners, knowing what they run for and how they run for it and what got them in is what I am all about.
Yeah. I can very much see that, right? Nobody kills themselves really,
Oh,
right? And it's funny, right? Because I mean, up until I knew of ultras, I thought marathon distance was the longest distance, and I thought that was the distance where everybody kills themselves, right? And then a few years later, we are like, 50 Ks. That's when it's really fun.
yeah, yeah. And it's that togetherness. I mean, everybody has that one goal, just to have fun and finish, and then, yeah. I mean, only a certain few can get sponsored.
That is very true. So, so this was your Badger experience, and I'm sorry to hear that it didn't go well.
Yeah,
Let's pull the timeline back.
yeah.
And how did you get into running? When did you start? What was the motivator? Let's pull us back.
Okay, yeah. Well, you're going ahead. So yeah, that's sure. I was always a runner when I was in high school. Well, before high school, when my I grew up watching my dad run Boston marathons, Honolulu Marathon, Portland Marathon when it was good and great. I ran it myself when it was great before the downfall, but I was always that young kid running 5Ks and in Hawaii and in Georgia because my dad was in the military, and he would take me, and to spend time with him, I'd run with him or ride my bike. And then when he goes to races, he's like, "Hey, you want to run the race?" I'm like, "Sure." So I get these little trophies and just enjoy just getting these awards. So I kept going and going, and high school hit, did a couple sports, and then I just hit cross country. I did cross country for 3 years and on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. Ran against Alan Webb a couple times. Enjoyed that scenery. Did a few years of outdoor and indoor track. Then college hit. I, Even in high school, I was hitting the weights too, probably a little too much. And then I ended up trying out for the cross country team in college, and then just joined the rugby club. And so I started playing rugby. Then after college, I joined the army, got into the running again, full tilt, and then love that, but then something happened, and that's why I do what I do now. Um, I, I mean, if you don't mind, I can share with you what happened and
No,
why.
absolutely. If you are comfortable sharing it, I would love to. I would love to hear the story for sure.
All right. So, so before when I was in, it was 2006 to 2010. It was like full steam Afghanistan, Iraq, right? And my first duty station was Germany. Germany, when you get in Germany, you're way closer to Afghanistan and Iraq and every other country that has some kind of fallout, So you're the go-to. So the moment you get into Germany, or I got into Germany at the time, they pump you full of vaccines. This course, they said, hey, take the anthrax vaccine, and so they were just shooting them. We were about to go down range, and they were just going to just fill us up, And I'm all like, 5 anthrax shots in one sitting? That's not right. They're like, hey, Coleman, you better do this, or you're going to go to Mannheim. That's the European version of Leavenworth, right? And then they say, if you don't do that, not only will you go to Mannheim, you'll get a dock of pay, and I don't know if you know any of the military pay. It's not the best. so
Yeah, that's
so
what I'm hearing. Yes.
yeah, me being in the Army, me being not stateside, and being in Europe and taking care of a young family, my wife, who I'm still with now, I ended up taking that, and I had a bad response to it. And I don't want to seem like, like an anti-vaxxer. I'm not. It's to whatever you guys want to do with your body, go right ahead. So, um, the anthrax shot, I had a bad reaction. I had everything but the deformity, to try to prove it. It was difficult to prove it at the time. My body seized up to the point that I couldn't walk. I couldn't fully function as the person that I once was prior to the shot, right? Because of that weakness, I was pretty much thrown to the side, thrown to the wolves. You know, yes, I'm a man. I'm 40 years old. I have thick skin, but when you're shown a weakness when you're in the military, you're treated differently, right? So it was me going to all these appointments, me going to the economy doctors, the German doctors. German doctors will say one thing, the military doctors will say the other. So I had a lot of in between, or had a lot of black and whites observations, and I heard one from the economy, heard another one for the military side. So I was taking everything in, had every test you can possibly think of, had years of physical therapy. I had to learn how to walk again, from wheelchair to assisted crutch to walk with a normal gait. I still to this day, I don't think I walk with a normal gait, but I may do. But everything that I worked for my whole life was taken away from me. And go ahead.
No, I mean that's I mean this is crazy. And do you? I mean this is yeah. You needed 5 anthrax shots. I mean, is that?
That the one sitting, and the one thing that really tears my heart up is that they were saying, the people that weren't there, sitting in the same room with me, saying, oh, it's all in your head, oh, it's a placebo, oh, this and that. The amount of drugs I was on for the pain, the amount of drugs just so I can fully function as a dad, fully function as a husband, fully function as a soldier at that time, is quite mind-boggling and very hurtful. Like, just thinking about it and talking about this, it makes me feel good, but it also makes me feel a little emotional, just because it brings back some of the not so good times, but it's a life experience, and I just felt that using this podcast, your episode, to share my story. So, um,
No,
I
I appreciate it. Um, so
did it.
basically, you just I'm just trying to process and understand. So
Yeah.
basically, you had a reaction to getting
Yes.
pumped full with these vaccines, and that threw you so far out to the sidelines that you completely couldn't walk anymore, completely couldn't
Could,
function.
couldn't walk. I was in physical therapy in and out of the military after I got out of the military for over 8 years. I was in and out of physical therapy, learning how to just be a normal functioning person. To this day, I still find myself struggling, but I make do. I've been in and out of physical therapy, uh, and just working on mental health, emotional, physical health. You try to make do. You do make do, but no, I just had to teach myself where I'm at now. I did a lot of learning. I continue to do a lot of learning. I always listen to my body. That's number one. And if something's wrong, I go get it checked out, even though I am the most stubborn.
Yeah, yeah, I am.
you know, but to know that I had all that wiped away and I had to regain it in some way, and know that last weekend I did Mount Hood, and I continue to conquer these mountains, whether it's running, hiking, or trekking. Um, each each event's emotional in itself. It just it's it's different. It's different, and being the treatment that they give you when there's a weakness, there's no other treatment like it. And I'm not saying in a good way. Um, they throw you to the side. They belittle you. They put you to the side to the point that you don't know what's going on, and then they test you from anywhere from having syphilis to lupus to what else. They probably they make up rumors that you have HIV. I mean, it's just astronomical, and unbelievable that the treatment of the soldiers, if you're physically or mentally I want to say disturbed but compromised.
Mhm. You're useless to them essentially, right? Because
Correct,
they
correct.
see you as a tool to perform a function,
A
and
number.
yeah, and if you can't perform that task anymore, then you essentially become a burden to them, right?
You know what the task is? Do you know what the task is? It's if I couldn't pull a trigger because it's left the shots. So I worked and worked and worked to figure out what was going on. I went countless hours and MRIs, CAT scans, EKGs, whatnot, and they couldn't rule out Parkinson's. To this day, I take two different anti-Parkinson's to get through my day. So with that, I've come a long way. But knowing that I had some kind of answers, I had some kind of ruling, and that they actually acknowledged the disease or the complication that I accrued in the military, to say that I'm military retired at 28 was a big fu to them, but I didn't want to be broken at 26, 27, 28, and so at 28 got full retirement, and decided during this time decided to pay it forward. I decided to think about speaking up for the little man. Um, doing things to help the little man, the guys that didn't think they had a voice, the guys that struggled in the military and didn't know how to cope with, their ladies leaving them or thoughts of suicide. So I decided to get into the Master's of Social Work program. I was going to go to UW, but got on the waiting list, so I went to Walla Walla. And while I was in Walla Walla, I thought about, hey, you know what? If I'm going to practice what I preach, I need to get back on it. So doing years of physical therapy, still doing years of physical therapy, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start to just take control of my own life, get off all the pills, get off all this and that, start, I've been seeing behavioral health, counselors for years now, which has helped, and they are a big part of my life along with my family. And without them, I probably wouldn't be here. But I finally said, you know what? If I'm going to make a difference, I have to make a difference in my life right now. So I just was like, I'm gonna start taking it slow. I'm gonna get away from what the daily stressors. I'm gonna go outside more. I'm gonna learn how to walk. I'm gonna learn how to run through elliptical first, through treadmill. And then I started going outside. And every year, my family and I, we go to Lake Tahoe. We hit up Eastern Sierras, love that. There's no other mountain view like that. And I just found peace. Whether it was going slow, I never go slow anyways. I always have to make a workout of something, When I go on vacation, I drive my wife nuts because I always want to work out. And she's like, can't you just take a break? I'm like, what break? What are you talking about? So that drives me nuts. And it's taken a few years. I've been with her for 16 years and love her every minute, I just told myself I needed to make some changes. And so once I started making those changes, I was just like, this is me. This is what I can do. This is how I can make a difference, not just in my life, but in others, and show people that people can change if they just get out of that funk of some sort. So start thinking positive.
There are people that are in a funk that is completely selfish, if you will, self-inflicted, a level of laziness. But you had to completely relearn life. And that's an incredible story in itself, but the way you're able to talk about it, it speaks also to the way how precious it is to you now, right? So you're not just keeping yourself busy because you're desperately trying to be distracted from how hard life is. You are busy because you're living life at the fullest. You know what it means to sort of not have it.
Correct. And it's taken me years. And it's still, every day is a new day, and it's a learning experience. And I'm not the one that goes on a soapbox and tells everybody, how to live their life, but for me to be happy, I had to learn how to be happy, how to be upfront, how to be honest, not just with myself, but others around me, and, I've been wanting to honestly tell this story on my podcast, but I just never felt, people were worthy enough to know the story. So that's why I was happy that you asked me to be on the podcast, because I was like, I think this will be my day that I actually share my story. And to be honest with you,
go ahead. No, I feel like I'm hugely honored that you picked that platform, but I absolutely don't want to make this about me. I think that there's sometimes it's better to find a neutral place to share it. But it's such an incredible testament, because in some respects, I don't know, would you consider it, looking back, as a freak accident? It is sort of a situation that isn't really fully explained afterwards, right? You have to find a way of just moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And what also got me into this, it was perfect timing too, because like when I did Mount Hood this past weekend, it, I normally do things alone. I always, most of the time, I do things alone. If I'm lucky to have maybe Sean, my buddy who lives in Medford, Oregon, who comes up Central Oregon to meet me and conquer mountains and trails and stuff. Every now and then, I'm blessed to have him with me, and he's been there from day one and knows how things have been through thick and thin, And uh, I went with a couple guys this past weekend. Never been out on the trail with them at all. Talked to them. I met this one guy. He's an Air Force recruiter. His name is Jacob. I met him this past winter at Silver Mountain Resort in Kellogg, Idaho. You ever been there?
No, I've not. I've hardly spent any time in Idaho.
Okay, well, you got to go, man, because it's one of a kind. But anyways, I went to the resort. I was in the hot tub with my with my wife after a long workout and everything else, and I met this guy. Lo and behold, he lives in Tri-Cities. He's in the Air Force. He's a recruiter, and I was like, "Hey, man, I got this podcast. You might want to check it out. I do all this. I do that." He's like, "Yeah, I've tried to do Hood. I've been wanting to go out a few here and there, and so we've been in touch." And so we figured out Mount Hood. Let's do Mount Hood. Let's do this. So we did it. Then went with a total stranger, one of his friends, one of his friends, and just totally kicked it off, man. Like I'm not that open to having people conquer a mountain with me.
It is a delicate balance, right? On one side, it can be exhilarating because you have this incredible experience with people that you don't know, but you are putting yourself into their hands in some respects, and you are what the Germans call Seilschaft. It's a rope team, right? Even if you not necessarily have to be always roped up, but you are a team where everybody's performance and risk assessment and stuff, right, has an effect on who you are and how you are going to get to experience this too.
So I don't claim to be like the best guy on the mountain or best guy in shape. And, they were worried. They were talking about how they're out of shape and, you're going to kill it, Nick, and everything else. So, you know what I told them? Like, even before we even started thinking about going on Mount Hood, I told them, I was like, dude, I'm just going to take the back. I'll take the back. I ended up taking the back. And it was perfect. Those guys killed it, they killed it. And so what I was trying to get at was with them killing it, I let my guard down and I told them bits and pieces of what I told you, and it made them feel like, holy crap, how can you be climbing these mountains when you've dealt with so much? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. I just never thought of it. I mean, I do. I think about it every time, the struggle, but I also, the triumph trumps the struggle, I think. And that's what gets me. That's what I think the reason why my wife allows me to go on these excursions, these one-day excursions. Like, I'll leave at 1 o'clock in the morning and won't be back until like 6 o'clock at night or 8 or 9. I mean, I barely sleep, but she allows me to do that, and I love her to death. And it's just a great time, before, maybe probably 10 years ago, I wouldn't be this happy. I was still trying to find myself. I was still trying to figure out, like, what would make me happy, how it would make me happy, how would I go about doing all that. Now it's like, okay, here's my story. So
it makes these experiences all the more sweeter, right?
Yes.
Oh, for sure. Yep. So Hood wasn't your first mountain. So give us a quick snapshot of what are sort of your biggest adventures you've been on.
My biggest adventure, I would say, man, I've been on so many mountains I can't count. Like seriously, I love them all. Like I said, the Eastern Sierras just hit differently than the Cascades. It's just one of a kind. There's nothing like seeing granite.
I know. It feels a little bit more accessible, right?
Yes. Yes.
I know. It feels like you just want to sort of bound from rock to rock, right? Where in here, it feels like
Yes.
the bushwhacking sometimes to get to the place is quite laborious.
Correct. And you know, I've made it a point that, you know, I've done so many mountains that I'm you know, I train to circumnavigate or do circles around mountains, you know, like the Timberline Trail around Hood or the Wonderland Trail around Rainier. You know, I try to do that, or Eagle Cap in Wallowa Lake area, you know, that kind of thing. But one that stands out, and I'm gonna say this, and I'm going on a limb. People can, you know, make fun of me at any time, but you've ever done Half Dome?
I have not. I've not spent enough time in Yosemite Valley to do a Half Dome. I've always every time I wanted it, and you know, it was a permitting system, and I've had family with me, and they didn't want to do it, and so it's always been a little bit tricky logistically. But yes. I totally would love to do it. I mean, the hiking route, of course.
Yes. And I would say on that, when you're on the dome, that's the sketchiest thing I've ever been on. Like, if somebody says that wasn't sketchy or they didn't feel a little off-putting, I want whatever they are on, because that, I had the adrenaline rush, but I also had a grip. I had a grip on that wire. Because if you let go, you're going to go to each side or either side, you know, and maybe see your demise. But I would say Half Dome is probably the highlight. Yes, it's only 8,548 feet, but there's something about it. I mean, the slab of granite, the work from Yosemite Valley to the top of a Half Dome is just unbelievable. There's no other hike like it. Now, if I had to pick a trek, the most beautiful trek that I've done was North Lake to South Lake in Bishop, California. It goes through John Muir Pass, Evolution Lake. I mean, if you look at Evolution Lake Evolution Lake and those mountains there, they're just so pristine. Hardly anybody goes up there, but that right there, you go on the John Muir Trail, you get your cake and eat it too. You see a lot of things. You see people that, you know, just share the same love for the outdoors as you do, and that's good, you know, and that's like the greatest feeling. It's the coolest thing ever.
I love that you love that area, because, I mean, I grew up in Germany, and from growing up in the 80s, 90s, Yosemite Valley was the mecca for rock climbing. You know, all the brands, you know, had all the ads of, you know, of the valley. And so for us, it was always this big place. And so I was a little bit worried when I went the first time, because I thought, well, it was so hyped up in my imagination that's now 20 years before. Yeah. It surely can't live up to that weird childlike nostalgia. And I went into Yosemite Valley and I was just absolutely awestruck. It is an unbelievable place. It is truly, truly phenomenal. It lives up to all the hype.
That entire mountain range is just one of a kind. I mean, I've done all Tahoe peaks. My plan this year was to do the whole Tahoe Rim Trail.
Okay.
But because of the gas prices, I put that on hold.
You know, I just saw a tweet from a skier that I follow that lives down in that area, and he was just pointing spring skiing in the eastern Sierras hits different this year. Yes. And he posted a photo and it was like $7 a gallon of gas or something.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh man. Don't blame ya.
Yeah, so I'm gonna wait until the gas prices go down and then hit it again. But I think those are the two worthwhile trips. It's different. I mean, you run mountains, right? I mean, you do Mount Eleanor's in your backyard, correct?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that the staircase area of the Olympic Mountains is for us 45 minutes to an hour away. So once the peaks melt out, this is not just an incredible place to take the family on a fairly quick, half day trip, but also from a preparation point of view. It's great. Mount Rose is right next to Mount Eleanor, and it's this 6.5 mile round trip, 3,500 feet of vertical gain trail that from a training you can just hammer, right? It's so yeah, I love that kind of terrain for sure.
So, what got me into the mountains though was when I was in Garmisch, when I was dealing with all the medical stuff. I went to the resort there and fell in love with the Bavarian Alps, and that's why I say, like, when I Eastern Sierras hit different. The Bavarian Alps, there's nothing like that. It's just unbelievable. It's a beauty in itself, and it's just like smack dab. Here's a town, and then smack dab mountain. And so I just fell in love with it. I was like, I felt peaceful. I felt at peace. The mountain air, the trees, the winds, the rain, the snow just hit different. And so that's what really got me into the mountains. One of the things that I just started learning is taking a step back and enjoying the scenery. I never took time to enjoy the scenery until recently. I've always been balls to the wall. Here I am. I'm going to conquer a mountain or conquer what I set up to do, and that's it. I never stopped to smell the roses, so to say, until recently. So,
well, I mean, it again, right? I think that's the beauty of our movement, that we can slow down, right? We have the ability to sort of slow down and experience our environment. We sometimes get criticized, people saying that trail runners run too fast, right? You don't actually get to really experience this. But on the other side, on some days I get to go further. I get farther away, and that makes it then worthwhile.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't know if you heard or if you're part of any of the Pacific Northwest climbing social media pages, which I really despise. There's a lot.
That's why I'm not.
Yeah. I don't want to be on that, but my buddy who went up there with me caught an eye on what they said, but I couldn't summit Hood because the element. We couldn't. There was a conga line all the way up to Hogsback. Have you been to Hood?
I've been not on the top now. I've been to Hood, but I've not done any mountaineering on a mountain.
So I didn't take offense to not finishing it because, man, Hood, if it wasn't for the element, it would be the easiest mountain I've ever done. And because of the conga line, because of the new 2 feet of fresh snow, wind-kissed, snow, and also first time it's going to hit the sun, you're in a conga line and you start observing shifts in snow. That kind of flash before your eyes. It's a weird feeling, and as these people are waiting in line, you can't move because they're breaking, trail in front of you. And so if they make a step, you make a step. If they make a step, I mean, we're basically sitting ducks there. And so we're at Hogsback. We're a stone throw away to the summit. And the guy who was assessing or breaking way, he had one of those, what is it? Those the avalanche
Probes.
backpacks.
Oh, the backpacks. Yes, yes.
Yeah, he had the backpacks, and he was digging a hole. You know, that cube, as they say, the cube. He's digging. He was like, it's very unsteady, not safe, and I believe there was a guide too in the group. And as he was making that cube and making that way, I was watching the things that were flying down on the hill or in the mountain, and I'm like, something's not right. And with all this weight on this slab of ice and the newly fresh snow, 2 feet of it, I'm like, this isn't a good combination. So I looked at the guys for the first time that I ever climbed with, right? And I was like, dude, I got kids. I can't do it. They were like, good call. Let's go down. And as we were going down, it's amazing how many people are out there for themselves. When you're going down, especially that sketchy, you tend to try to do what's right. But I was telling the guys, I was like, hey, look at this. Look at every man for themselves, whether they're skiing, snowboarding, or humping down with, crampons like we were. As we were going down, you see that snow shifting. It's unbelievable. But then you get these social media warriors, the mountaineer armchair guys criticizing us for being part of the mass exodus. They weren't up there. He didn't summit, but he had enough to talk about this groupthink of his and how groupthink can be a bad thing, but it also could be a good thing. But he also criticized the people who left the mountain when they did. Now, my question is, I'm pretty sure if it went the other way around, if there was an accident, I'm pretty sure he would say, what a bunch of idiots, And
You can never listen to these people, right?
I know.
The only person that you listen to is your wife. Because you made it back alive, and therefore it was the right decision.
Yeah. And so that, and I've stated on my podcast too, that there's a reason why I do things alone. I'm glad I was with those guys though, but a lot of the attitudes, the egos and everything else is a huge turnoff in this game, and I just do what I do. I'm happy what I did. Like I said, that has to be the easiest mountain if it wasn't for all the other elements. Mm-hmm. Most beautiful mountain I've ever stepped foot on, and I've been on a lot, and there's nothing like it. The pearly gates. And before, I never even took pictures. I never take pictures of anything, but I had to, just so I can show people that, I was there.
Oh, no, I hear you. I mean, this is always... The risk assessment part is a very, very interesting part. And with a lot of experience, you gain a different appreciation of what's at play here, right? It's not just the terrain. It's not just your personal fitness level, right? You have to assess the people around you. You have to assess the people that go with you. Obviously, the weather plays a big part. So there's so many factors. And the more experienced, the more often you go out, the smarter you get, right? I mean, you also upping the risk to the point that, every time you put yourself out there, you put yourself at a risk, but at the same time, you're also gaining experience, right?
Yeah. And this is way too early for me in my season to climb a mountain that tall.
Sure. I mean, I wanted to bring this up. I mean, this would still be almost considered a winter climb, right? Considering that how much new snow you had, right?
Yes, and I'll be honest, I had the most excruciating pain in my fingers, man. My buddies, the guys that I went up with, we took a break, made sure we got all the crampons on, but in order to get the crampons on, you had to take the gloves off, and that little amount of time that we had our gloves off gave us a whirlwind of pain, and we had to stop and question whether or not we could go further. And we ended up getting over it, but my buddy Jacob, he had more pain up top there, I never thought my hands would feel like that. They would explode. I mean, you can't do anything with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other feeling.
Mm.
So
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that winter is an element that is, yeah, that yeah, you don't really train for really that much, right?
yeah. It was a good experience. Would I do it again? I would do Mount Hood any season, just because it's so beautiful.
Hmm.
There's and because I was only a stone's throw away. I'm going to do it next month.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's sort of a little bit sort of the double-edged sword, right? On one side, it's accessible, so it is
Yes.
possible to do it again. On the other side, I mean, the Alps can sing stories of that by creating accessibility. You creating these conga line problems, right? Where sometimes when you're out there, it's good to have people around you, especially if you're in a situation where you don't really know how to
Yeah.
assess it, right? Okay, well, they're making it across whatever, so I can follow them or I can see how they are dealing with this. So sometimes it feels good to not be alone, but there is certainly a tipping point where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
now it gets too much.
And, and like they say on Everest, and they also say on Hood, I mean, when they say there's a lot of traffic, there's a ton of traffic on Hood, man. I never thought there was so much people that wanted to do the same thing. There was an open window, weather-wise, a perfect window, but that's the wind-kissed snow, the fresh snow for 48 hours is not a good mixture. So I learned a lot, and I'm glad I was able to tell that story too. You see a lot. The traffic alone, it's a turnoff. So my thing is I'm gonna hit it when I feel comfortable doing it, and that's early summer, late spring. So
No, for sure. Well, thanks for sharing that
yeah,
Mount Hood story. I think it's good that we don't just share the glorious moments where everything went well, right? I think it's
yeah,
important. Yeah, I think to, we're skewing sort of the experience, and then people get inspired, but then they get themselves in trouble. So being able
yeah.
to assess risk correctly and be okay with the adventure, the experience, and
Oh heck
still
yeah.
walk away having had a beautiful day without having tagged the peak. So what, you can come back, right? I think that's
Yeah.
the mature way of approaching now.
One of the things that I am is very transparent.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
hey, I'm not afraid to tell my kids, hey, I didn't finish the race. Hey, I didn't finish the mountain, and they're like, really? And I'm like, I got it next year, or I got it next week, or next month. So
Yeah.
I live to tell the tale.
Yeah. No,
So
I think it shows. Well,
yeah,
it shows reality too, because I mean, as your life story is telling, not everything always
yeah,
goes according to plan, right? You can't win every single time you put money on the table, right? And so
right,
I think that's what life is actually more accurately about.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, you know, so that gives with all the traveling that I do, that comes to mind on why I started the podcast. I started the podcast. Is that okay?
Perfect transition. That's exactly
Okay.
where I was
Hey,
going.
so
I
you're
can
on a
tell.
podcast.
I can tell you're a podcaster. You know how to transition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, no, it's good. And plus, with that interruption with my daughter, it just gives me an out to say we're long enough. But what
Sure.
is it? The podcast. With all the traveling I do, all the views, the experience, the relationships, the friendships, the conversations. I was like, you know what? I know I'm not a big name. I know for a fact I'm not a big name. I do what I do because I love it. I am not famous in any way, but man, I get these conversations like a celebrity would. I see things that that are just you know awestruck. And I was like, okay, well, if I do these mountains and I meet the people, especially at like a brewery or a local coffee shop, I'm going to strike up a conversation, and we get the wildest conversations. I see the wildest things. I see and hear their story, and I'm like, there's something behind this. I think I can do this. And I always love radio. I always love sharing in a way, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this podcast thing. So it took me 3 years to say to my wife, like, hey, I'm doing a podcast. She laughed in my face, but
it's like, oh, a white man with an opinion. Yes, we need another podcast. That's how I feel every day.
Yes, she laughed in my face, but she's my biggest supporter, and
sure.
We're going on 58 episodes right now, and getting out more people actually telling me that they love my podcast in itself is surprising. But the thing is that with all that experience and what I do and how I do it and being transparent, the one thing that I made this podcast for is to promote healthy living, that you're never too old to start something new. Mm-hmm. Get outside, enjoy outdoors, local brews, whether it's coffee and beer, I like them both. The eateries, the basic mom and pop shops, and lastly, the experience of a lifetime, the conversations, the great times that you meet. If it wasn't for me venturing out, I would have known Jacob or met Jacob and did Mount Hood with him the other last weekend, or I wouldn't have met you because of this podcast or the running, and then learning about you because, word of mouth. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable what this has been, and what it's brought to me. Every day is a new adventure, and it's just, it feels good to be able to venture out and learn new things. And that's why I started the podcast. I do what I do, and I continue to do what I do.
I love it. So the podcast is called Miles, Mountains, and Brews, which is correct. Perfectly encapsulates in a title what you were just saying. So from a format point of view, you're doing things differently, that you record mostly all the time live?
Live, unedited, raw.
Unedited and on location, right?
Correct.
I mean, that's a very cool format, and hats off to you. The logistics would sort of blow my brains out in trying to find a space that works, that's good enough and stuff. But on the other side, it brings it a lot closer to what I said initially. You want to hang out with people at a bar and drink a beer, right? And sort of you are doing that and just hitting record.
Yeah, when I started, it was like mostly campfire conversation, have a beer and, talk about what I did outside. And each person on the podcast, Leah, she does ATVing and off-roading. Dwayne's a big, burly black guy who has the voice. He's known as the voice. I don't know if you've heard him say that, but he's the camper, the guy that loves to go outdoors and just have a beer and cook. So everybody brings their own aspect to the podcast, and man, it's a lovely dynamic. It's the greatest thing ever.
That sounds absolutely amazing. So everybody who needs another podcast, because I unfortunately only record hour-long shows, and ultra runners run way longer distances than an hour, so you need another podcast in your feed. Check out Miles, Mountain, and Brews. Subscribe in your favorite podcast player. Nick, thank you so much for sharing your story. This was incredible. I truly appreciated you opening up and sharing your journey, and it's so great to hear that you were able to not just crawl out and be okay with where you're at, but actually come back and now run ultra races and climb mountains and stuff. Yeah. It's fantastic.
I appreciate it. I really do appreciate the time, and hopefully, all that, the timeline in itself made sense, and everybody was able to understand from A to Z, and where I'm at, and continue to be going towards. So,
for sure,
I appreciate your time and the platform. Thank you.
Absolutely. Why don't you send people? Where should people go if they want to reach out and connect with you? What's the best place?
Instagram and Facebook, but Instagram, you can find me at MMB Miles Mountains and Brews _ podcast on Instagram. That's how you can meet me. Or
perfect.
Hit a message, get a message out. Yeah.
Super. So we'll link that in the show notes. Connect on Instagram with Nick of Miles Mountains and Brews, and subscribe to his podcast in your favorite podcast player.